As strange as it may seem to some, ancient Rome was a diverse society, and its population included individuals with a variety of skin tones, ranging from very dark to very pale. So it's not correct to categorize all ancient Romans as white based on modern definitions. The most ancient human skin color was dark. Science is now admitting that humanity began with dark skin tones in Africa. Though the Greeks and Romans are often depicted with European features, these depictions were not reflective of the entire population, particularly as it pertains to the Etruscans. They were a mixed race. Uncovering ancient Rome's black origins can be challenging. Reference to dark melanated people is usually only traced back to the Ethiopians. However, some artistic images did shed light on the diversity of skin tones by portraying melanated individuals with very dark skin and tightly curled hair. In this session, we will continue to examine the Roman Empire's relationship with the Etruscans and look at some of its black emperors. Let's look at this information from Ancient Origins, and it's talking about Rome's African emperor, Septimius Severus. It says the Libyan-born Septimius Severus has gone down in history as the first African emperor of Rome. With a thirst for power, he ruled the Roman Empire almost 2,000 years ago, declaring himself emperor after the definitive battle of Lugdunum in 197 AD. So Septimius Severus was born into a prominent and wealthy family of olive oil magnates in Leptis Magna in what is now Libya in 145 AD. Visitors to the Roman remains at Leptis Magna can admire the Ark of Septimius Severus, which is still standing today and is a UNESCO protected monument. His hunger for success led him from Africa to Rome in 161, where his contacts gave him access to the powerful senatorial ranks. Now, this is the history Europeans try to hide, because Greece and Rome serve as the foundation of Western civilization. Those empires are the standard of quality and greatness. So revealing the truth about these melanated rulers will not align with the Western civilization's ideal of whiteness. This emperor, Septimius Severus, was the father of Caracalla. Let's find out more about him. He was a Roman emperor. He ruled jointly with his father, Septimius Severus, from 198 to 211, and then alone from 211 until his assassination in 212. His principal achievements were his colossal baths in Rome. If you don't know about the baths, Roman baths were more than just a bathing facility. They were essential to ancient Roman society, serving as places of hygiene, socialization, and even healing. So it says he was known for these colossal baths and his edict of 212 giving Roman citizenship to all free inhabitants of the empire. He was the elder son of Lucius Septimius Severus, the North African, and Julia Domna, a Syrian. So it's obvious that there were melanated people in power in Rome. Because a lot of the statues were made out of white marble, many assume that all of the Roman emperors were white. But as discussed in the last session, the descendants of Esau were connected to the ruling elites, and they were of mixed race. So let's look at the connection we talked about last time. We were talking about the Etruscans. I want to pick up from there. This comes from Time Map. We want to look at Rome's Etruscan heritage. This says Rome is located on the edge of what was the Etruscan homeland. Certain institutions and customs came directly from the Etruscans to Rome. Listen, in fact, the name of Rome itself has of Etruscan origin, as are the names of its legendary founders, Romulus and Remus. There were strong Latin and Italic elements to Roman culture, and later Romans proudly celebrated these multiple origins. Before the Etruscan arrived, undoubtedly as a ruling group, however, Rome was probably a collection of small farming settlements. The Etruscan elite provided it with its early political arrangements, the monarchy, the army, and urban infrastructure like walls, forum, drainage system. In short, it was probably they who turned Rome into a full-blown city-state. It goes on to say Etruscan civilization is the modern English name given to a civilization of ancient Italy. Its homeland was in the area of central Italy, just north of Rome, which is today called Tuscany. The Etruscan civilization lasted from the 8th century BCE to the 3rd and 2nd centuries BCE. In the 6th century, the Etruscans expanded their influence over a wide area of Italy. And you can see by this map here that it was a great expansion. It says they founded city-states in northern Italy and to the south. Their influence expanded down into Latium and beyond. Early Rome was deeply influenced by Etruscan culture. The word Rome is Etruscan. The word Rome is Etruscan. In the last session, we traced the Etruscans back to the descendants of Esau. The seed of Esau was not only living in the Roman Empire, they held positions of power there, and they were also ruling over Judea. The Edomites, also known as Idumeans, were a mixed people ruled by the Herodian dynasty during the time of Messiah. Listen to this from Mark 3:7-8. But Yeshua withdrew with his disciples to the sea, and a great multitude from Galilee followed him, and from Judea and Jerusalem and Idumea, and beyond the Jordan, and those from Tyre and Sidon. A great multitude, when they heard how many things he was doing, came to him. So this confirms that the Edomites were definitely living in close proximity to our ancestors. The question is why? Esau hated Jacob. Why were his descendants living in our land? What happened to their kingdom in Seir? We'll dig into that by looking at some information from Biblical Archaeology Society Library. This is entitled Edomites Advance into Judah. It says, like many peoples mentioned in the Bible but otherwise almost unknown, the Edomites are coming to life through the wonders of archaeology. The origins of the Edomites, like those of the early Israelites, remain obscure archaeologically. They seem to have emerged as a people about the same time as the Israelites in the period archaeologists call Iron Age. It says, unlike the Israelites, however, the Edomites have left us no literature comparable to the Bible. Therefore, we know them largely from their material culture as dug up by archaeologists. It goes on to say, for the earlier history of Edom, we must turn to the results of archaeological surveys. While these surveys have not yet covered the entire area of Edom, they have made a major contribution to our understanding of the settlement of the region and its chronology. The earliest Edomite settlement of the area appears in Iron Age, about the time that Israel was emerging on the other side of the Dead Sea. Most of this early Edomite occupation occurred in the northern part of the country on a rather small scale. The survey also confirmed that settlement of the country reached its peak during the 7th century BCE, when Edom was ruled by Assyria and thus was subject to the Assyrian polity known as the Pax Assyriaca. As might be expected, the pottery from Edomite sites during the period of Assyrian hegemony reflects Assyrian influence, but it also reflects the material culture of Judah, the neighboring kingdom across its border. At the same time, the unique pottery forms the figurative and decorative art found in Edom. It indicates that the nation had developed its own independent material culture. The Edomite script also differs in some respects from the normative contemporaneous Hebrew script. Now it says, during the 7th and early 6th centuries BCE, at the end of the First Temple period, the kingdom of Judah was threatened by the Assyrians and then conquered by the Babylonians, who destroyed Solomon's temple in 586 BCE. Now listen, the Edomites took advantage of this opportunity to expand into a severely weakened Judah. Isn't that just like the Edomites? They prey on the vulnerable. It says the story of Edomite expansion into the Negev is not only told in biblical texts, it is also being revealed by mounting archaeological evidence. I'll drop down, it says we even have archaeological evidence of the conflict between the Edomites and the Israelites at this time. From Israelite Arad, we have a Hebrew ostracon from the late 7th or early 6th century BCE that refers to a possible Edomite attack on Judahite settlements. This is a letter, presumably from authorities in Jerusalem to the commander at the Arad fortress. So the letter said, I have sent to warn you today. Get the men to Elisha. So Elisha was an Israelite commander. It says, lest Edom should come there. So they're giving the warning to this commander to go and get men because it was expected that the Edomites would try to come and attack this place. The question remains, though, how do they lose their land? So this journal article is entitled The Edomites in Southern Judah. Let's see what else we can find out. It says, in the Hebrew writings of the Persian period, we encounter repeated allusions to the northward advance of the Nabateans, who invade the districts lying south and east of the Dead Sea, including especially the territory of Moab, Ammon, and Edom. The encroachment of these Arab tribes on the domain of their more civilized neighbors on the north is a fact of considerable significance for the history of the Yehudis. As the Nabateans, pushed from behind, gradually moved northward, the Edomites were the chief sufferers from their advance, and these in turn, being at length driven out from their old territory, were forced into southern Palestine, of which they finally gained possession, certainly not without a fierce and protracted struggle. It also says, the definite information that we have regarding the Nabatean occupation of Old Edom is in an account of the campaigns of Antigonus in this region in the year 312 BC, preserved by the Greek historian Diodorus. At that time, the Arabs were in full possession and apparently had been for a considerable time. At all events, the historian of the expedition, who had been at some pains to inform himself about these nomads, evidently supposed them to be the old inhabitants of the land. From passages of the same narrative in Diodorus, it appears that the Edomites were also at that time firmly established in their new domain. Continuing, it says, before the end of the 7th century, the Nabateans began to press hard upon the Edomites. The latter were not long able to hold them back, but were soon obliged to yield up one portion of their territory after another to the invaders, or else to share it with them. Increasing numbers of the Edomites, driven from their old homes, began to force their way into Palestine, but at first were held in check. It says, while matters were in this state, the Babylonians invaded Judea in the early part of the 6th century. The Edomites, whose own condition was becoming desperate, turned the situation to account and seized a part of the Negev and Shephelah, either by actually allying themselves with the Babylonians, or, what is more so, that by the middle of the 6th century the main shifting had already taken place. It says, the former territory of Edom being chiefly in the hands of the Nabateans, while the Edomites had advanced into their new domain, which included the greater part of that which we find them occupying in the time of the Maccabees. So as they were being pushed out of their land, they began moving in on our land. And this was during a time when Judah was in a weakened state. Not only that, they joined forces with the Babylonians against us. It says, now that the Edomites were the next door neighbors of the Yehudis and were even crowding farther and farther into the sacred territory, the people of Jerusalem were in a way to be well informed of the devastating attacks of the Arabs, as these in turn invaded the Negev and the Shephelah. For the same reason, the proximity of the Edomites with its continual menace, the Yehudis came to look upon this people as their peculiar enemies. The part they had played at the time of the Chaldean conquest was never forgotten. Edom becomes the representative of hostility to Israel. It says, this way of using the name becomes more and more common until, for example, among the rabbinical writers, Edom is a frequent designation for Rome. So references can be found in Obadiah, Jeremiah 49, Malachi, Isaiah 34 and 63 regarding their treachery and why they're going to be repaid for it. Now let's make the connection between the Idumeans or Edomites and the Roman Empire. We'll look at excerpts from this book called The Rise of Christendom by Edwin Johnson. This was written in 1890. All right, so it begins by saying the chronicle explains that by the race of Esau is meant the Greeks, and that Rome was a son of Esau whose children gained possession of the land of the Greeks. This is reconfirming what has already been covered, that the original Greeks were colonized. It says, in other words, the Arabians mean by the sons of Esau the inhabitants of the Roman Empire. The Jewish chronicles designate the same by Edom. So it says, in the land of Rome and of the Maghreb was a great empire, that of the Ionians or Greeks. King Philip was a descendant of Esau, son of Isaac. In his kingdom there was a town, Macedon, residents of the kings of Greece. In this land were the Greek sages, and all of the wisdom of the world came from them. They were such as Aristotle, Hippocrates, Plato, Socrates, Hermes, Apollonius, and Agathemon. Their books on philosophy, medicine, and other sciences are numerous and well known. Today, there remains naught of them, and their cities are ruined. And of course, we know that they got the information from the Egyptians, but let's go on. It says, Philip paid tribute to Dara like the other kings, but when Dara the youngest succeeded, he was attacked and slain by Alexander, reputed son of Philip, who is called the Sol Carneum, because he obtained the empire of all the earth. Alexander was in reality son of the Persian king Bahram, and of a daughter of the king of the Greeks. When Philip died, he took the crown, and his mother informed him of the circumstances of his birth. His conquest of Persia and the death of Dara is described, and it is said that of Alexander collected the Persian books of wisdom, had them copied and translated into Greek, and sent to Aristotle, the greatest of the sages. Now it says the chronicle gives an account of the successors of Alexander. Ptolemy Lagos, it is said, placed at Alea a chief from among the children of Israel, that he might practice the religion of the law. Ptolemy Decianus succeeded, and the commentaries say that he ruled the people of the cavern. At the end of 240 years, the empire of the Greeks passed to the Romans, to a man who descended from Esau, namely Augustus. He reigned 56 years, and in the 42nd year of his reign, Asa, son of Mariam, was born. Between Asa and Alexander there was a space of 319 years. So that information helped to add some details as to why they were there. And now we can talk about the Edomite kings and priests. This information comes from BYU Religious Studies Center. It's entitled Judea as a Roman Province, from AD 6 to AD 66. It begins by talking about Messiah being born into a kingdom ruled by Herod. It says, although Herod was the reigning king of the Yehudis, his position as monarch depended entirely on the will of the Roman emperor and the Roman Senate. Herod began his political career as a procurator of Galilee, serving under Hyrcanus II, the Jewish high priest, who ruled as ethnarch, which literally means ruler of the nation. When Hyrcanus II was captured during a Parthian invasion in 40 BC, however, Herod was forced to flee to Rome to beg for assistance. Listen, with the help of powerful friends such as Mark Antony, Herod was proclaimed king of Judea by the Roman Senate and given sufficient military support to reclaim his new kingdom from the Parthians. So this is a confirmation of what we discussed last time, that Esau already had connections with the ruling elite in Rome. Zepho and the Etruscans were the early pioneers. And now we see Herod, an Edomite, ruling in Judea. I want to point out also that I'm only going to do a cursory overview of some of the Edomite rulers, but I encourage you to listen to a series that Pastor Omar Tebow did some time ago regarding the historical connections between the Edomites and Rome. I'll leave a link to the videos in the description. It goes on to say here that because Herod was the ruler of an independent kingdom, his territory was not considered part of the Roman Empire. However, this technicality did not prevent Roman officials from regulating Herod's rule. if Herod did anything to displease the Roman Senate, the Senate could inflict disciplinary actions against him. Consequently, Herod was considered a client king of Rome, that is, an independent monarch accountable to Rome for the administration of his kingdom. Let's look at this reference regarding Herod from Oxford to confirm that the Herodian dynasty was actually of Idumean origin. It says the Greek name of an Idumean dynasty whose members governed Palestine for a century and a half, which included the New Testament era. Because Idumeans had been forcibly made Jews about a century before the reign of Herod the Great, he was always despised by authentic Yehudis. Herod was appointed king by a Roman Senate, since Judea had become part of the Roman Empire at the capture of Jerusalem by Pompey in 63 BCE, where Herod took control in 37 BCE with Roman military help. Herod was not eligible on account of his non-Jewish ancestry for the high priesthood. Judea had formerly been part of the Greek Empire of Alexander the Greek, and Herod became a patron of Greek culture. He was responsible for important building projects: Caesarea on the coast, the fortress prisons of Masada and Macarius, and the vast new reconstructed temple, which was to occupy a quarter of the entire area of Jerusalem, begun in 20 BCE and eventually completed in 62 CE, only to be destroyed in 70 CE. Herod ordered the execution of any potential rivals to his throne, including his wife and their 2 sons. Now let's go back to the journal article. It says, as a client king of Rome, Herod was forced to maintain a delicate balance between pleasing his Roman patrons and pleasing the Israelites, many of whom considered the Roman culture an affront to their way of life. It says Herod, however, maintained this political balance by portraying himself as a Roman to the Romans and an Israelite to the Israelites. In his predominantly Gentile territories, Herod commissioned numerous building projects to honor the Romans and their culture. For example, on the site of Strato's Tower, he built a massive coastal city that he named Caesarea in honor of the emperor, and he erected multiple temples to honor Augustus across his kingdom, including the extravagant temple in the heart of Sebaste. Additionally, he built the Pythian temple of Apollo at Rhodes at his own expense, after the original temple was destroyed by fire. By embracing Roman culture and flattering his Roman patrons in these ways, Herod was able to secure his throne. And he also held on to power by doling out leadership positions to his friends who were not Israelites. Let's look at this journal article entitled Rise of the Idumeans, Ethnicity and Politics in Herod's Judea. It says, as the Hasmonean dynasty expanded its territory, it began annexing regions that were populated by non-Judeans. According to Seth Swartz, the Hasmoneans ruled these areas through native vassals or friends of the king. Idumea was one of these annexed territories, having been conquered by John Hyrcanus I. In addition, Idumean elites became a part of the Hasmonean court almost from the beginning. Josephus records that Herod's grandfather Antipas was of Idumea under Alexander Jannaeus, and by the time of John Hyrcanus II had become high priest and king of Judea. So we see that the ruling powers were not Israelites. Again, we're talking about the kings and priests who were in positions of power in our land before the time of Messiah. And Scripture is confirming a lot of this information. Let's look at this from Acts 1, 4 through 7. The backstory here is that Messiah is about to ascend into heaven, and he's telling the disciples to wait for the promise of the Father. He says, which you have heard of me. He's speaking about the Holy Spirit, the Ruach. He says to them, John truly baptized with water, but you will be baptized with the Holy Spirit not many days from now. But the disciples had a question about the rulership of the nation of Israel. It says they asked him, will you at this time restore the kingdom to Israel? He replied by saying, it's not for you to know times or seasons which the Father has put in his own authority. In other words, there are some things that you're not going to be told right now. But this is confirming that converts pretending to be the true people were actually in our land and serving in leadership positions. And we're talking about the kings and the priests. A great example is found in this passage in John 8:31 through 44. Messiah was talking to the people that believed in him, and he was warning them about the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Then he says, if you abide in my word, you are my disciples indeed, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. They answered him, we are Abraham's descendants and have never been in bondage to anyone. How can you say you will be made free? Now, family, there is no way an Israelite, a true Israelite, would be able to make that statement. They were in bondage in Egypt. How could they forget that? They were also in bondage to the Babylonians. The house of Israel went into captivity. They were taken into captivity by the Assyrians. So only the descendants of Abraham who were not Israelites would be able to say they were not in bondage to anyone, to include the descendants of Esau. So Messiah answered them and said, most assuredly, I say to you, whoever commits sin is a slave of sin, and a slave does not abide in the house forever, but a son abides forever. Therefore, if the Son makes you free, you shall be free indeed. Listen to what he says. I know that you are Abraham's descendants, but you seek to kill me, because my word has no place in you. I speak what I have seen with my father, and you do what you have seen with your father. Listen, they answered and said to him, Abraham is our father. So Messiah says, if you were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham. But now you seek to kill me, a man who has told you the truth, which I heard from Yah. Abraham did not do this. You do the deeds of your father. Then they said to him, we were not born of fornication. We have one Father. So they say their Father is the Most High. But he responds by saying, if he were your Father, you would love me, for I proceeded forth and came from Yah. Nor have I come of myself, but he sent me. Why do you not understand my speech? And he's going to explain why. Because you are not able to listen to my word. You are of your father, the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own resources, for he is a liar and the father of it. Who was he talking to, family? He was talking about the descendants of Esau, the Pharisees and Sadducees, who were Idumeans, but they were pretending to be Israelites. So let's shift just a bit and go back to the Etruscans, because they had a major role in establishing the Roman Empire. This information comes from dailyhistory.org. It says, how did the Etruscans shape Roman history and society? The Etruscan civilization was an early civilization that inhabited Italy from Tuscany to Rome. It is little known and was largely forgotten until archaeological discoveries once revealed its power, complexity, and sophistication. The Etruscans had a unique civilization and culture. Esau hid himself among the nations, the ruling elites. It says, however, they made a decisive contribution to the history of Europe because they shaped in many ways the early development of Rome. Many of the most distinctive features of Roman society were in fact influenced by or directly borrowed from the Etruscans. The Etruscans were a formative influence on Rome, and this can be seen in its religion. This is telling us that the Etruscans influenced the religion of Rome. It can be seen in its religion, culture, urban planning, and engineering, and they also helped to establish it as a great city and one of the greatest powers in Italy. In order to understand Rome, it is necessary to understand the influence of the Etruscans on the early Roman Republic. Let's continue reading about their religion. It says, little is known about the nature of Etruscan religion, but many writers have declared it to be gloomy. It seems that the exact influence of Etruscan religion and myths on Rome will never be known. It seems that the Romans did adopt some Etruscan deities and demons. Now listen to this. These demons were eventually transmitted to the Christians. Transmitted to the Christians. I'm going to cover more about this in the live this coming Wednesday so that we can see how these descendants of Esau continue to maintain power through rituals, particularly the ritual sacrifices. So be sure to join me for that. It says the Etruscans were renowned for their oracles and prophecies. One of the Tarquin kings purchased the Sibylline books, which became the prophetic literature of Rome from an Etruscan temple. Oracles played a very important part of the religion of Rome. Many of these oracles were of Etruscan origin, and these were known as the haruspices. This was the art of interpreting the will of the gods. Soothsayers from Etruria were very much in demand and seemed to have passed on their skills to the local Roman priests. The Etruscan soothsayers could allegedly understand the will of the gods by observing phenomena such as lightning. Another Etruscan method for understanding the wishes of the gods was the examination of the internal organs of sacrificed animals. One of the more curious Etruscan traditions was the observation of the way some sacred chickens ate their food to understand the divine will. Even after the Etruscan kings were expelled, listen, the Romans still respected the oracles of the Etruscans. The Roman Senate ordained that the Etruscan oracles and ceremonies be maintained in perpetuity. They wanted the Etruscan oracles and ceremonies to be maintained in perpetuity by the state, and they were practiced by Roman priests until the Christian era. Do you honestly believe that it stopped when they adopted Christianity? Let me just say, a lot of what we see in these churches, or should I say the way they do church, is what was passed down from these Etruscan priests. A lot of what was called worship of the Most High is actually worshiping the rulers of darkness. This is how they continue to maintain power through these rituals, particularly the ritual sacrifices. So again, be sure to join me for that discussion during the live. Let's continue reading from this Times Maps article to see how the Etruscans influenced Rome's military. It says, like other ancient cultures, warfare was a major aspect of their political life. Like many ancient societies, the Etruscans conducted campaigns during summer months, raiding neighboring areas, attempting to gain territory, and engaging in or combating piracy. And we shouldn't be too surprised here because Esau thrives on war. But listen to this. Human sacrifice was a feature of their religion, and prisoners of war could end up on the altars of Etruscan gods. As part of this sacrifice, prisoners were sometimes set to fight one another. The Romans later took this practice over, and it grew into the gladiatorial entertainments of the Roman amphitheaters. So human sacrifice was a feature of their religion. Now let's dig a little deeper to find out why the gladiator games began in ancient Rome. It says the Romans of antiquity who believed they had been given dominion of the world by the gods. Is that not the mindset of those who enslaved our people and trafficked them around the world? They believed they had been given dominion of the world by the gods. They strove to provide grandiose spectacles to entertain their subjects and to demonstrate their power. Most historians agree that the Romans derived the idea of gladiatorial combat from the Etruscans and the ancient Greeks. Warfare had been so intricate and so decisive in its determination of men's lives that it had become part of their religion throughout the Mediterranean. So why were they engaging in ritualistic sacrifices that also involved humans? To appease their gods. Remember, it represented a transfer of ownership. Things and people were offered up to their gods. Family, yes, we need to continue the conversation, so we will end it there. If this message has been a blessing to you, please hit the like and share it. You're also welcome to subscribe if you have not already done so. We upload the messages on Sunday mornings at 8:30 a.m. Join me next time.